This presentation is for our course, Literacy Development of English for Pupils with Reading Difficulties. And it is LD, Learning Difficulties, and Neurons. It is part 1, and afterwards you'll watch part 2. We as English teachers work with all sorts of kids and all sorts of ages. We don't always know what's happening in their brains. In fact, we rarely know what's happening in their brains. And sometimes we think a person doesn't have good memory or is not trying. In this presentation, you're going to see what is really happening inside of a brain and how our memory is made up of very, very small neurons. It's not magical. It's based on chemistry. It's based on electrical impulses. And it is absolutely fascinating. For people, children, doesn't matter the age of learners, who have difficulties in your classrooms learning vocabulary, learning how to spell, there is often a reason for it. And it's not because they're not motivated. Often there is a problem with how the neurons function. It is not their fault. Often hereditary, as you learned in a previous session. And I think you'll be fascinated, and I want to know what you think afterwards. This slide is about learning, especially learning for the first time. So if a baby has never seen or touched a cactus, what is the process of learning? Clearly, he or she, let's say she's cute little pink shirt here, has sensors on her fingers and on her hand, also in her eyes and all over her body. There are in our brain 85 billion sensors or neurons, 85 billion, over 100 billion in our body, neurons that is. But there are many, many, many millions of sensors on the tips of her fingers. So she goes to this pretty little plant, the cactus, and she feels the stimulus. In other words, she feels the cactus. And once the sensors feel the cactus, a message physically goes from the neurons in her fingertips. One neuron talks to the next neuron, talks to the next neuron, talks to the next one, all the way up her arm and into her brain. And in the brain, the message that it's not something good to touch gets interpreted as pain. And she understands that it hurts, like ouch. It's the brain that makes the decision the first time, not the hands. And that interpretation then goes back neuron by each neuron talks to the next neuron along the line from the brain. It's backwards in the picture here. From the brain down to through each neuron, all the way back to her hand, in which case she then withdraws her hand from the cactus. So in real life, she touches the cactus, ow, and takes her hand away. It's half a second. But in order for her to take her hand away, those neurons in her body, those sensors, the nervous system, but neurons, need to talk to each other and go zoop all the way to the brain and zoop all the way back to her hand so that she can withdraw it. I want you to think about this and remember this, because when you are teaching English, the same thing happens. So if you are teaching the letter B, and the person needs to see the letter B up on the board, and you say this is the letter B, and it says B, and those sensors, the neurons in that person's ears will hear it. It gets interpreted in their brain, and then other neurons have to go and actually have them repeat. If you're going to have them repeat, they're saying B. Those neurons need to work properly, and they need to communicate with each other. You'll see pictures of neurons in just a short while. And if those neurons don't function properly because of a heredity or injury or who knows what, then the learning does not take place well. Or the person learns the letter B, but then they come back tomorrow and you say, so what did we learn yesterday? Lo zocher hamora, lo zocher. They just don't remember it. It doesn't get remembered. So memory is made through neurons, with neurons. That is why it's really important for us as teachers to understand the process of what happens when somebody learns something. In this slide, I want to show you what those sensor cells look like, the ones that are called neurons. If you look at the left, these are 6 neurons. These are real photographs. This is a real photograph of real neurons under the microscope, of course. And they have many dendrites, many arms coming out. They have a center. You can see like a circle in the middle. That's the cell body. I'll show you shortly on the right. And they have all of these arms coming out, and that's how neurons communicate with other neurons. I simplified it in the previous slide by saying that one neuron talks to the next neuron, talks to the next neuron. Obviously, many neurons are involved in learning of anything. But if you understand the process in a simple way, then you understand what is happening. And obviously, it's more complicated. If you look at the right-hand image, the structure of a neuron, the purple on the left is the neuron. In the middle is a nucleus. If any of you have taken chemistry, biology, you might have seen cells under the microscope. It is a cell. It's a part of the nervous system of the body. Coming out from the nucleus are tree-like structures, branches called dendrites. The dendrites bring information from other neurons, and if the charge is enough, it's electric charge and chemicals also. If that charge is big enough, is strong enough, then all of that information comes into this neuron, and the neuron can then send that message along to the next neuron in the row or next to it. If you look at the long arm over here on the right, that's covered with yellow, it's actually fatty tissue. That's called an axon, A-X-O-N. So each neuron has one axon. They have many dendrites, but only one axon. That's where the information that is received by the neuron is sent to the next neuron. Now, since it is an electrical charge, it's like a buzz, the body tries to protect that charge by putting myelin. It's called myelin. Myelin, again, is a fatty substance, fatty and protein, to protect the electrical charge. Just like on a telephone wire you have, or any wire, you have rubber to protect the wires, so it doesn't, there's not a ketzel, there's not, so that the information transfers effectively. The body does the same. So it protects that charge. Now, the very first time that somebody learns the letter B, the information comes in from the dendrites, from you, from the teacher, from the blackboard, the whiteboard, and then the person has to say it and remember it and tell the next neuron that you have to write it or say it, so that information goes along the axon. If the person says the letter B and recognizes it over and over and over and it becomes automatic, then the myelin grows and protects it even more. In other words, the memory is stable. The person memorizes it easily because it's protected. That charge and that knowledge is protected. Now you are looking right here at memory. This is memory. So these neurons are what help a person remember anything, whether it's something that you see, touch, smell, abstract, not abstract, literature, whatever it is the person has to remember, it's done with neurons. So Hashem makes it incredible. It's not magic. It's on a chemical level and on an electrical level, and the body is amazing, but this is what you're looking at, is memory here. Now is the time to watch this 6-minute clip of the Khan Academy. They have wonderful material. We used some of the material for a different course that we were studying about the anatomy of a neuron, which is explained well, of course. You have the link here, the URL, and if for some reason it does not work or you can't copy it, then just type in anatomy of a neuron, what's written here, and you'll get to it from Google. You are eventually going to be explaining the process of memory to a principal. That's part of your assignment. And I want you to be using the correct terminology and basically the concepts properly. So here are the main concepts or terms that you'll need to know, be able to use. They're not difficult, you can always come back. These are two neurons, obviously, the one on the top and the one on the bottom. The one on the top is sending out its axon, you can see the arrow, and it is giving information like the cactus really hurts, or that's the letter B, down to the next neuron. And if you see the little box where my cursor is right here, that is where it almost touches the next neuron in the line. So here is the box that is now enlarged, and here's the message coming in from the neuron on the top, and it sends out chemicals which are received by the receptors in the neuron at the bottom. So the axon from the top neuron doesn't actually touch the bottom neuron. It's called a synapse over here, synapse. It's a little space, and chemicals are given out. That's the information through chemistry are given out, and they are received by the next neuron, which is quite amazing. People who have ADHD, attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, it's often said that the timing is off. So a message is sent, but it's not received with the right timing. There are different theories, but when they, for example, take Ritalin, which is really a pep pill, it peps up the brakes, the blamim. It's a little bit more complicated, but it happens on the neuron level and at the synapse level and at the chemistry level, and that's how people are treated and helped if they go that way. So the first term is neurons. Know what it is. You've heard me. You watched the clip. Dendrites are these little tree-like structures or branches that collect information from other neurons. For example, the neuron on the bottom is collecting information from the neuron on top through its one axon. Those are dendrites. The axons, each neuron has one axon, gives out electrical impulses and chemical impulses or transmitters. For example, dopamine. When you feel good, you know, you have it's called dopamine. It's the happy chemical. And that gets transmitted with neurotransmitters. You don't need to know that, but you need to know about axons. The myelin sheath, which I explained and also the Khan Academy explained, insulates the electrical message. The more it is insulated, or if it is insulated well, that message, that impulse, then that's good memory. You remember the letter B with no problem. You remember how to drive a car, how to ride a bike. You remember that person's face. You remember the person's name. That is myelinated axons, and that's the myelin sheath is what insulates it and makes for good memory. Myelination is the word. That's the process that the axon becomes myelinated. Synapse we went over. Automaticity is if you learn something on an automatic level, you don't have to think about it, like when you have a stick shift car and you just simply drive and you're home and you didn't even notice driving home. There you are. It's automaticity. Reading in class needs to be on a level of automaticity. So the neurons need to function properly. The axons need to function properly. They need to be myelinated properly in order to remember letters, in order to remember how to read, in order to remember whatever it is you're teaching, the vocabulary. And this, folks, is what memory is all about. And here's where things can sometimes go wrong, anywhere along this area. So if you think about memory, it's not something magical that just happens. It happens with tools of Hashem. And Hashem uses electrical impulses, chemical transmission from neuron to neuron. Billions and billions of neurons go into learning whatever it is we have to learn, from simple to extremely complex. When you are listening right now, millions of your neurons are being stimulated. And if you understand the language of the brain, I think you might have an appreciation for what's going on with some kids whose language does not work as well as other kids, as other people. Since I didn't want to make this particular presentation too long, I divided it up into two. So you have just finished part one. Now kindly go to part two. See you there.